This is Dr. Neil Boumpani. Welcome to my channel, yourchildseducation.com, saving your child from the failed public school system. Okay, today I'm going to talk about school discipline, but first I'd like to ask you to listen to my video with an open mind and avoid condemnation before investigation. People are quick to dismiss another person's ideas or opinions before even hearing what that person has to say. We become polarized as a nation and tend to put up our defenses as soon as we hear an idea that we think comes from the other side. If we're not willing to discuss our differences, how can we solve our problems? They're not discussing differences in Washington, and they're not solving our problems. Okay, school discipline, just another reason to get your children out of the public schools. Every adult has at one time made this statement regarding school discipline. I couldn't get away with that stuff when I was a kid. Though this has been somewhat true in the past, there's no debate when it comes to school discipline today. Our schools are a mess, in large part because of years of extreme liberal educational thought, court decisions that did not protect the victims of the violence, and politicians who blame discipline problems on our teachers and school policies. When I went to school in the 60s and 70s, chewing gum could get you an hour of detention. And if you did get detention, your parents did not come to school to blame the teacher, as many do today. The changes in disciplinary policies over the years have irreparably harmed the educational process in many schools. Today, teachers are assaulted on a regular basis, and little to nothing is done to effectively discipline that student. According to one study, since students returned to school after the COVID-19 break, 10% of teachers nationwide have been assaulted. This is 1 in every 10, according to that study. Just recently, we heard of a teacher being shot by a 6-year-old student. Search the internet, or go on YouTube, you can find hundreds of teachers and ex-teachers sharing their stories of violence against them. Yet the 10% figure might be very underestimated. Many teachers fear reporting incidents to their administrators for fear of retribution. Retribution! A teacher gets assaulted, reports it, and the administration puts the blame on a teacher. Seems that many principals don't want bad press, so it's easier to blame the teacher. After all, the school seems out of control. Who's the person to blame? It's the person in charge. It's the principal. Even on the higher education level, it's a well-known fact that many date rape incidents either are not reported or underreported for the same reason. The college is not going to admit to a lot of them. Bad press hurts enrollment. I want to give you a short story of my own experience, and this goes back. About 30 years ago, I took a job teaching 2 small middle schools in North Carolina. I was an experienced teacher, and I looked forward to the job. At the time, I taught at one school in the morning and the other in the afternoon. My morning school was well run by a tough, no-nonsense principal. He did not allow students to disrupt instruction. The job was still challenging for me for many reasons, but discipline was not among them. The school in which I taught in the afternoon, well, that was another thing entirely. On my very first day, I greeted the students at the door with a smile and a good afternoon. Students came in from recess, so they were a little noisy. Now, I understood this as I patiently waited for the bell. The bell rang, and I went to the front of the class, waved my hands, and a call for quiet. Nothing changed. I repeated my call for quiet. Then I went over to the lights and switched the lights on and off just to get their attention. Again, it went on. It took about 5 minutes, and finally, I had to raise my voice to my band director voice, which I can be very loud, and called for everyone to please be quiet. I guess I shocked them, because they did become silent for about 20 seconds and went right back to their previous actions. I tried to teach a few students in the front of the room, but we could not hear each other over the roar. After the class, one young girl came up to me and said, "I'm sorry that they were like that," and she left. At the end of that day, I went to the principal and told him how rough a time I had, and I had never experienced anything like it. I asked if there was something he might suggest. After listening to me state my case, he just calmly looked at me and said, "You must have done something to upset these children." I was beside myself for a moment. I could not believe what my ears were hearing. I remember asking, "Are you serious?" It didn't take me long to realize that I was not alone with my concerns. Not all classes were as bad as mine, however. There were far too many of them that were out of control. I befriended a few of the veteran teachers who were helpful. I realized that not one of them had any respect for the principal. These teachers were excellent teachers, and some of them had been there long enough to establish classroom discipline. Unfortunately, I could not adapt their solutions to my classes. I was trying to teach beginning band, which requires some self-discipline on the part of the students. In my middle school band class, I had beginners on every instrument, all in the same room. It's impossible to teach instrumental music to everyone simultaneously. Teaching a person to play flute is not the same as teaching a person to play the trumpet. There are too many differences. So while I was teaching the flute players, the other students were expected to simply wait quietly. I was good at pacing my instructions so that I got to everyone as quickly as possible. And I did include daily lessons that involved everyone. But I was fighting a losing battle. As soon as I began to work with one section, half of the class decided that it was their right to do whatever they wanted. These students knew that the principal would do nothing. At times the room was so loud that students sitting 3 feet away from me could not hear me talking. Eventually, the students who really wanted to learn simply gave up. I spent 90% of my time each day trying to get students' attention and asking for quiet. During that school year of roughly 180 days, I believe I spent no more than a total of 2 hours actually teaching that particular class. At the same time, the classes at my morning school were moving nicely. At the school, hallway fights broke out on a regular basis, and when the fights started in my hallway, other male teachers and I would step in and stop them. Before the fights would start, I often saw the principal standing at the end of the hallway, only to disappear as soon as the fight started. After we established some calm, the principal would come back down the hall with a stern look and ask the students, "What is going on here? How did this start?" None of the faculty were fooled by the principal's cowardice. At this time in my life, working at the middle school was not the only job I had. I was also directing the athletic bands at Duke University. At Duke, and I was there for 17 years, for most of that time I was a one-man staff. The demands of the job, especially in the fall, meant that I would often get by with little more than 3 hours of sleep a night. Now, back in the middle school world, since I ended my day at the afternoon school, I was expected to attend that school's faculty meetings. During one of the first faculty meetings, which was about 2 hours long, the principal continually berated the teachers for the school's problems. I finally tried to tune him out until he made a comment that upset me. And this is what he said. "Now, those of you who work other jobs should realize that this job comes first." I knew it was directed at me, but he really had no reason to bring it up in a meeting before everybody. In the first place, I was only supposed to teach one of 2 classes at his school. In the beginning of the year, according to my contract, I taught them 3 classes at the morning school and 1 at the afternoon, and the other class at the afternoon school was supposed to be taught by somebody else. I actually requested that I teach both classes at the afternoon school in order to give the students the continuity in their instruction from year to year. Now, I showed up every day, and I had yet to take a sick day at this point. So after the meeting, I went right up to him in his office and explained to him that my reasons for working a second job was because I had to, not because I wanted to. My wife was disabled, and I was the sole breadwinner. Since he was not expecting anyone to question him, he got a little flustered and quickly said, Oh, that was not meant for you." That was the last faculty meeting I ever attended at that school. Whenever a faculty meeting arose there, I simply told the principal I had a parent-teacher meeting at the other school, and I left. Yes, I lied. Now, in hindsight, I should have walked out of that job after the first day, but I've never been a quitter. Later in the year, I and a few other teachers organized an off-campus teachers meeting to discuss the problems with school discipline. We all had the same concerns regarding everyone's safety. We were upset that these disciplinary problems were harming students who were there to learn. About half of the faculty, maybe a little more, attended the initial meeting. We all agreed on drafting a statement which we would sign and send to the superintendent. When the document was finalized, only about half of those in attendance actually signed it. Many teachers feared retribution from the principal or from the higher-up administrators. I didn't care. Signing that document was for the good of the students as well as my own sanity. Well, the letter made it all the way to the superintendent, who then invited the signers to his office to discuss the matter. When the time came, only 3 of us showed up. The superintendent listened, empathized with us, and told us that he would look into it. Then nothing was done. It took several years of parents and others complaining to finally get the superintendent to do something. But instead of firing the worthless principal, the superintendent played politics and played musical principals. There were 3 middle schools in the district. He just shifted the principals around. It did not make anybody happy. Well, my story took place in 1988. Although I was threatened by students attending that school, I was never assaulted. Today, teachers are assaulted all the time. Some are hit by students as young as 5 or 6. As I stated above, recently a 6-year-old brought a gun to school and shot his teacher. We are seeing more and more young children coming to our schools with mental disorders. Far too many young children grow up in homes where there is little to no parental supervision. When some of these children come to school and suddenly have to follow rules, they feel picked on and many get angry. Also, when ill-prepared children realize that other students can maybe write their name or even read a little in the first couple days of school, that ill-prepared child may begin to feel that he or she is worth less than the other children. This often makes the troubled child even more angry. The prepared child can print his or her name, knows to sit still and pay attention, and knows that an adult is in charge. Now, in the past, these prepared children were called normal. Today, they're called privileged. Let's look at some scary statistics. According to an article in Education Week from March 17, 2022, entitled, "Violence, Threats, and Harassment Are Taking a Toll on Teachers," survey shows 1/3 of all teachers have experienced verbal harassment over that past school year. Please note that these threats came from students, parents, and administrators. The same article states that 14% were physically assaulted, continued to say that 43% of today's teachers want to leave education as soon as possible. Survey also stated that 29% of teachers and 42% of administrators have been verbally threatened or harassed by parents. One startling statistic claimed that 18% of teachers have been verbally victimized by an administrator. Okay, now, of course, today we consider what people believe is victimization in today's society. This number might not be accurate. Some people today, if you look at them the wrong way, they're victims, and they let you know it. So I'm not sure of this statistic, but still, every teacher should feel as if the administration is on their side. Children should never believe that the principal will not support any teacher, of course, unless that teacher does something illegally. These statistics are indeed alarming. They clearly demonstrate the problems with school discipline. If we can't keep our teachers and other students safe, how can we hope to have effective schools that prepare children for adulthood? I contend that many of the educational policies that have been enacted over the past 60 years are to blame for many of the disciplinary problems today. The problem worsens when the very people who helped create the mess are then called upon to fix it. One researcher, Susan McMahon, the chair of the APA Task Force on Violence Against School Personnel and a professor at DePaul University, gave her expert solution to school disciplinary issues. Her answer only supports my claim that she is part of the problem. Her conclusion is what she said: schools and teachers' preparation programs should offer more training and support for educators that focus on social-emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, cultural sensitivity, de-escalating tense situations, and crisis response training. And teachers should receive more training on how to communicate effectively with parents. This is the problem. I doubt researchers like McMahon would last one day in many public school classrooms. Still, those like her push their new training programs like vaccines that were created by the same people that created the disease. I cannot tell you how sick I became of each new educational training program that was forced on me over the years. Each one promised better control of classrooms and better student attention. As I see it, every one of these programs was someone's idea of putting another Band-Aid on the problems created by the earlier programs. This only shifted the responsibility for the failures of the programs from the creators to the teacher. Teachers continue to be told that if they have discipline problems in their classroom, it is because they have not received enough of the higher education prescribed proper training. So the experts who sit behind college desks and publish these idiotic ideas are essentially telling us that we're the problem. They continue to get their grants and publish their studies in top journals, enjoy their titles and accolades. In the meantime, your children suffer because of constant disciplinary issues that not only interrupt instruction, but put your children at risk. Thing is, the common everyday working person sees through these snake oil salesmen dressed in professor clothing more clearly than the educated sheep that follow them. My late brother Marty never finished high school. He did spend time in the Army. He was in the Army during the Berlin airlift, worked his entire life as a mechanic. He was a great father, raised 3 great children, and was a great big brother to me. Even without any degrees, he was always able to see through the nonsense of those who hid behind their degrees and titles. He would commonly say, "Don't urinate in my eye and tell me it's raining," except he didn't use urinate. And he said it right to people's faces. He, like many others, knew that these educational experts and their programs were to blame in the first place. Now, there's other reasons we are given for these problems. In another article from Education Week dated November 1st, 2021, it was suggested that the surge in violence taking place in our schools may be the result of the stress of the pandemic as well as the violence after incidents like George Floyd. Now, what happened to George Floyd was horrible, and the policeman was deserving and received punishment. The rioting that followed, however, should have been stopped in its tracks. We can't have a society that takes to the streets whenever something upsets them, especially before they get all the facts. There's a legal process that the accused go through to determine their guilt. The loss of life and property that occurred after that event was not handled by the state and local government officials who swore to uphold the law. Many private businesses were destroyed, which had nothing to do with the poor judgment of the police officer. People were hurt. People broke into stores and freely looted, as if that was solving the problem. Now, during this time, local government officials sat back and did little to nothing, some even applauding the breakdown of law and order. And of course, at the time, they blamed President Trump. Now, because of the media hype and the weakness of many elected officials, trust in law enforcement has been diminished. This is not because we have so many corrupt police departments. We do have some bad officers, we have some bad doctors, lawyers, teachers, etc. But many times, even good officers make bad decisions. Still, the media hype proclaimed that the police were all fascists and racist, and they should be defunded. Far-left politicians went along with this insanity. The media avoided reporting that many of the poor people living in crime-infested areas were actually calling for more police. None of the media addressed the problem of surviving in a country without law officers, even though I have stated time and time again that we need to communicate with those who have different opinions from my own. I don't think I could carry on a discussion with anyone who was stupid enough to say that we'd be better off without any law enforcement. This insane position on police is partly a result of years of public school indoctrination on the evils of capitalism and the beauty of Marxism. So people riot and destroy, get their way like 2-year-old children throwing temper tantrums without parents around to spank their spoiled butts. The spineless Marxist politicians then turn around and give these children everything they want, but nothing they really need. All the while, nobody really examines the root causes of the problems or tries to find a solution. And that's the big problem. We're not looking for the root problems. In my last years of teaching, even some of the more intelligent college students believe the defund the police insanity. I wonder what they would do if they ever needed the police and there were none around. What happens if we didn't have police? Does that mean that rapists will stop raping people? Because of how little our youth know of history, Many young people believe that America has been this evil country which has created all this tension in our country and in the world. They've been taught that the evil greed of capitalism is the root of all evil, and that only Marxism will save the world. They refuse to acknowledge any factors that are based on the irresponsible choices that people make. America has never been perfect. There has never been a perfect place. Many of our problems have been solved over time. Our republic form of government was designed to allow the people to effect change. Students today are not taught that history. Our youth only hear what their Marxist teachers and professors tell them, and they accept it. Remember what Hitler said: tell a lie over and over, and eventually people will believe you. Our young people have not been taught that. In a republic, overcoming injustice while maintaining liberties and freedoms is always a challenge, and change never comes fast. Another lesson our young have not been taught: maintaining liberties Americans have enjoyed for over 2 centuries is the responsibility of every American citizen, not the government. Now, research has been the sacred cow of higher education for decades and decades. However, research can be used to demonstrate something that may or not be true. In research, there are always variables that affect the outcome. Leave out a variable or handpick variables to work for the solution a person wants, and the results can mislead many. You may hear of research that suggests crime in our schools is not as bad now as it was in the 1990s. Well, I'm not sure that makes me feel any better. In some ways, maybe it's true, although I doubt it. However, there is one variable that researchers do not take into account when considering the statistics. We did not have No Child Left Behind in the 1990s. No Child Left Behind has trained students that they could sit in class, do next to nothing, and still pass. They still get pushed along. The standards in some places are so low that anyone can pass. When teachers put no demands on the students to learn, or they don't stop them from sitting there and texting their friends or sleeping, it has the effect of taking away some of the tension between teacher and students. So any drop in violence might be attributed to the policies of No Child Left Behind. Still, there is far too much violence in our schools, and it's getting worse each year. This is just another reason to get your children out of the public schools. In another post, I will address some possible answers. However, since I do not believe that schools can be saved, I will not discuss these ideas here. A little bit about politics. President Obama further weakened school discipline by placing racial quotas on disciplinary acts. Obama threatened schools with federal review if the students they suspended were disproportionate to the school population. For example, if a school was 20% Hispanic, but the Hispanic students represented 60% of the suspensions, the schools were at fault and had to correct it. Once again, instead of addressing the root issues, a quick fix was put into place to placate the president's voting bloc. Now, fortunately, this order was rescinded under President Trump. I'm sure some of you are going to consider this racism, but once again, the original policy of President Obama was simply wrong. So let's examine this before you blow a gasket. Our schools are supposed to prepare people for the future. If the schools can't effectively discipline children, they grow up to believe that they can get away with bad behavior as adults. When these people eventually find themselves in trouble with the law, they are not only surprised, but they get angry and believe that their rights have been denied. In other words, when somebody finally says, no, you can't do this, they don't believe it. So please, if your child's in the public schools and you can get that child out, do it. If not, find ways to first combat what they're being taught, and secondly, to supplement what they're not getting taught. Thank you very much. If you like my videos, please subscribe, like, ring the bell. Please visit my site at www.yourchildseducation.com, where you can leave comments, take part in discussions. And again, I'm starting this channel and this site early in 2023, so it may take a while to take off. In the meantime, I'm going to try to continue to add videos and posts that hopefully will start to help parents help their children. Thank you very much.